alchemy and the bejeweled video as an overview. I was wanting to talk about all of the alchemical imagery that we're seeing now, and I realized that I needed to go back and give more of a broad overview of where we've been for it to make more sense. And this is a version of a presentation that I gave last year with my friends. I gave them a PowerPoint on the alchemy of the bejeweled music video, and I'd been meaning to make a video about it on my page, and then I kept getting annoyed with her, so I kept not doing it and getting distracted. But I thought it was a good timing, since I guess tomorrow was like the Pentecost or something. So that has to do with, I forget. I think it has to do with transubstantiation, maybe. Whatever. So I went back and did a more streamlined version of that, so that everyone could see the sequence and how, and it's also interesting in the light of what we know now, because one of the big things missing from the bejeweled video was the alchemical wedding, because she doesn't go through with the alchemical wedding, which is a critical part. And part of what I wanted to talk about was that I think that TBD is, I had this revelation today, in addition to having a lot of albedo, which is the second phrase, imagery in general, I think it also, I was thinking that it's about the album itself, and then her tour performance is the alchemical wedding. So I think that it's the wedding of those opposites, and I think the first half of TBD symbolizes the animus, or this, quote-unquote male-coded figure, solar figure, whatever, limited, those dualities of those opposites, which we don't have good enough language for. Solar, all of that, diurnal, sort of, all those gendered sort of masculine attributes, and then the second half is the feminine, more anima, and nighttime, lunar, all that sort of, quote unquote feminine coded attributes. So that was my thing today, and I'll go more into that. But first I had to do this, because it will make more sense if I go through the sequence, I think, in a logical way. And yeah, because I've been participating in all these alchemical discussions on Twitter and here as well, seeing other people talk about it, which makes me feel like I'm not crazy. And of course, her song over the alchemy being on is like a direct nod to the fact that she has been using alchemical imagery. And I happened to notice it because I had heard about literary alchemy even like 10 years ago, or longer than that. 2012, I think, was when I was went deep into the Hunger Games, and there was this great blog called The Hogwarts Professor, which it analyzes Harry Potter, which I obviously have departed from, but also the Hunger Games, and says that they both have alchemical imagery as their structure. And so it was really dead on. And she, the writer of the Hunger Games, has a master's in creative writing, so she's very familiar with these kind of story structures and beats and everything. So I got really into that, and it's sort of like alchemy is this idea of literally turning lead into gold, but then it became more of a metaphor or an allegory for the spiritual journey. So the symbolism of that became sort of separated from the actual chemical thing of people actually trying to do science experiments, but it became more about going from sort of unactualized to completely actualized, and in union with the universe, or whatever divine principle. So it symbolizes going from black, coal, dirt, earth, burnt up, to through this kind of that's the first phase, called the negredo, which is Latin for black, And then the albedo, which is Latin for white, and then the rubedo, which is Latin for red. So, and it's called the Great Work. And the yellow is also, there's also a yellow phase, but it's not like in everything. So the Bejeweled music video starts off with, this is some of her best work. This is disgusting. So in the, we know that she's Cinderella. The Negredo phase is symbolized by being imprisoned, in the basement. Someone's heart. And, it's dirty and it's covered in coal and dust, and it's just sort of like decaying, how things mold and they get, black and, decayed. And of course there's like a lot of, sort of, it's problematic to think about this as black as being the rock bottom, and then white, and then, gold being above that and sort of more evolutionary. So I'm looking at this more as like a historical framework for this, but I do acknowledge that it's problematic. And it's like, sort of rooted in this sort of like quote unquote Western canon of like, all of that. But that's a different topic. For this, we'll just be using this historical framework. So, she's in this state of servitude. She's been exiled, etc. Thought this was relevant, but slightly digression. It's the most defining thing. A proposal is the most defining thing a woman could hope to achieve in her lifetime. And then it goes to Bejeweled. And then snakes also are a sign of this. Part of it is we see with snakes here, and then we see dragons at the end, and stinky being dirty, gross, like putrefaction, like smell trash when it's rotting, like that kind of thing. Snakes and dragons, and then there's dragons at the end, have to do with the reconciliation of these opposites and all that. Drinking, I was thinking also that I cracked the code on the drinking thing. The drinking is a symbol or like an allegory for the alchemical process. So, she's in this first stage here, and during this first stage, there is a sort of a glimmer of the final goal, so to show you that there's there's dawn after the darkest night. So she sees this glimmer of gold, and also it's like a scallop shell, as we know, with the pearl sort of symbol, which is also alchemical. The ocean has to do with part of the alchemical process. And so she sees this light to get out, exile and watch as exile ends. So she starts to crystallize, much like Kennedy Davenport in Drag Race. And she's going out tonight. So night is part of this. It's the dark night of the soul, melancholia, as we know. Midnights on the album Midnights, all of that. The first stage, the stench of graves, images of bodies, all of that. You need to burn everything down to start over. Death, dying of the old state of things. The psyche is in a nox profunda, before the dawning of the new light of illumination. It's difficult, but only through experiencing it can we gain wisdom and humility necessary for illumination. Crystallization. The idea is that throughout this process you create the Philosopher's Stone as well. We'll stop here and then pick up part 2.